Dr. Mon'nique Ellison stepped out of the black car into the warm pre-dawn quiet of LAX. It was 5:37 a.m. She was dressed in slate gray joggers, a matching hoodie, and large black sunglasses. Her carry-on was minimalist and matte. She moved like someone used to slipping through spaces unseen. Except today, that wouldn't be the case. The terminal hummed with the usual chorus of rolling luggage and murmured goodbyes. Inside, the Delta Sky priority line was short. Mon'nique advanced without fanfare. Her global entry card, platinum status, and private security tags were all in order. She was, on paper, the least suspicious person in the building. Yet as she approached the TSA checkpoint, she felt it, the shift. The glance from the agent, too long. The unnecessary second swipe of her ID. The quiet signal to a supervisor. She'd experienced this before. Not lately, but often enough to know when the performance was about to begin. "Ma'am, can you step aside, please?" said the agent, flatly. She turned slowly, one eyebrow raised behind her oversized sunglasses. "Is there a problem?" "Just a random check." She exhaled. The first lie of the morning. They swabbed her palms, opened her carry-on, rifled through sealed cosmetics, and questioned the weight of her MacBook. Another agent arrived, whispering something about additional screening. This was security theater. And she'd studied it like an art form. Security theater. It had a name. The illusion of safety through performative measures. She'd spoken about it at conferences, cited it in white papers, even consulted with the DHS on algorithmic bias in security systems. But theory was easy. This was personal. They asked her to step into the glass booth. "You can opt for a private screening," one said. "I prefer transparency," she replied, and stepped inside. Gloved hands patted down her arms, her waist, her thighs. They lingered too long at her chest. She locked eyes with the officer. "Do I look like a threat?" The officer didn't answer. He didn't have to. When they were done, she was told she was free to go. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the next person in line. Her assistant, Candace, called just as she was tying her sneakers. "You good?" "They pulled me," Mon'nique said. "I'll be 10 minutes late to the gate." Jesus. The Zurich team's already boarded. Let them fly. We'll handle it from here. Wait, Mon'nique, are you saying? But she had already hung up. She stood still for a moment, watching the agents laugh at some joke. They never looked in her direction. She opened her travel app and cancelled her reservation. The Zurich deal was off. $4 billion in pending contracts. And the ripple had just begun. Part 2. The text message went out quietly, to exactly 11 people. Change of plans. Don't board. Zurich deal is on hold. More to come. M. Candace, pacing by the Delta Lounge in LAX, nearly dropped her coffee. Within seconds, her phone blew up with reactions. Confusion, concern, curiosity. Nobody questioned the authority of the sender. Miles away, in Manhattan, Dev Patel, Mon'nique's lead counsel, was already drafting statements. By the time the Zurich team's plane left the runway, the $4 billion joint AI partnership with Virex Systems AG was dead in the water. They didn't even know it yet. Mon'nique found a quiet spot on a mezzanine overlooking the departure gates. It was quieter up here. The morning sunlight was crawling across the walls. She opened her laptop and began typing. A new document, the cost of looking suspicious. Each keystroke was methodical. She wasn't venting. She was building something. What does it mean to be a threat? A profile? A pattern? A disruption? A target? She wrote about the illusion of randomness in security systems. About the unspoken calculus that made her, an Ivy League-educated black woman in Athleisure, the anomaly. About how every layer of privilege she'd earned through genius, discipline, and relentless excellence still couldn't buffer her from the biases embedded in institutional machinery. Then she paused. And smiled. This wasn't going to be an op-ed. This was going to be something bigger. By noon, her communications director, Aaron, was pulled from a spa day in Ojai and was speed-tapping an iPad from the back seat of a car heading back to LA. I need bullet points, Mon'nique. I need statements. I need confirmation. Mon'nique's voice was calm, measured. We're going public with it. Controlled leak. I want a 48-hour media storm. Then we do the interview. What interview? The one I give instead of Zurich. Aaron groaned. You're going to cost them $4 billion. They cost themselves $4 billion, Mon'nique said. I'm just giving them the receipt. In Zurich, Virex executives were already mid-toast in their lounge when they got the alert. A U.S. tech outlet had just reported unconfirmed halt to Virex Etherlink strategic alliance. CEO Jörg Niederhauser lowered his champagne glass. Was this DOS? His phone buzzed. An email from Etherlink Legal. Effective immediately, Etherlink is suspending all deal-related travel and joint project integration until further review. He blinked. What the hell happened in Los Angeles? Back at LAX, Mon'nique was now on her second draft. She pulled up slides, ones originally meant for the Zurich meeting, then stripped them down. Gone were the graphs and projections. What remained was raw data. TSA stop rates by race and gender. Algorithmic bias in facial recognition. Homeland Security contracts awarded to firms with discriminatory practices. Case studies of whistleblowers. Everything sourced. Everything public. Candace returned to her side. Press is calling. Everybody from Bloomberg to NPR. What should I say? Tell them to wait 24 hours, Mon'nique said, eyes still on her screen. Then we'll feed them the whole story. That night, she didn't go home. She booked a suite at the Nomad and converted it into a war room. Candace, Aaron, Dev, and two trusted engineers joined her by 9 p.m. Laptops were open. Monitors stacked. Data flows syncing. This was no longer a reaction. This was orchestration. Every time something like this happens, Mon'nique told them, we write a blog post. Maybe someone tweets. Then it disappears. But this time, Aaron said, you're the person it happened to. No, Mon'nique replied. This time I'm the one who's going to own the narrative. Not just change it. Weaponize it. They worked through the night. Drafting. Designing. Coding. At 4:07 a.m., Mon'nique uploaded a polished microsite, securitytheater.ai. It was clean, sharp, and unflinching. The homepage opened with live testimonies from people who'd been profiled at airports. It used NLP to aggregate keywords and tag patterns. It cross-referenced TSA procedures with racial disparities. It named names. Then came the kicker. The final section, cost of bias calculator. Users could input institutional actions, delays, cancellations, detainments, and see projected economic losses due to profiling decisions. It used actual corporate data, sourced anonymously from whistleblowers. At the top of the page, one line stood bold. This morning, a decision was made that cost $4 billion. Here's why. By dawn, it had 2.2 million hits. She got pulled off a flight for looking suspicious, so she pulled $4 billion out of their pockets. Part 3. 1. The aftershock. By sunrise, the story had gone global. The microsite Mon'nique launched, securitytheater.ai, was trending on X, LinkedIn, Reddit, and even TikTok. Influencers, civil rights attorneys, corporate watchdogs, and venture capitalists all had something to say. It had become a litmus test of values, a pressure point, and a cultural firestorm. At CNN headquarters in New York, producers scrambled to rework the morning lineup. The Zurich deal collapse was still unconfirmed by Virex, but Etherlink's silence spoke volumes. One tweet from a former Etherlink engineer went viral. "They taught us to train the algorithm to detect anomalies. Turns out, the system never learned to trust a black woman in a hoodie." Wall Street wasn't far behind. By mid-morning, Virex shares had dropped 8%. Etherlink's stock was steady, buoyed by public support and strategic silence. At 9 a.m. sharp, Mon'nique appeared on a live stream. No press. No makeup. No background but a simple white wall. "This isn't about me," she began. "This is about how power disguises itself as protocol. And what happens when you decide not to play along." She told the story plainly. No embellishments. No dramatics. Just what happened, how it felt, and what it cost. Then she closed with a sentence that would become a rallying cry. "If my presence looks suspicious, then maybe you need to redefine what safety means." 2. Boardroom tremors. Zurich was in chaos. Jörg Niederhauser had barely slept. The press was hammering his team for a response. Shareholders were furious. His CFO was muttering about reputational risk and regulatory scrutiny. "Call her," the CFO barked. "Make this right. You think this is about an apology?" Jörg muttered. He opened a secure line to Candace. "We need to speak with Dr. Ellison." Candace didn't flinch. "You had your chance. She's focused elsewhere now." 3. The domino effect. By day 2, institutions began to distance themselves from Virex. A major university pulled out of a research partnership. 2 consulting firms ended subcontracting agreements. The Department of Commerce postponed a pending contract review. Meanwhile, SecurityTheater.ai expanded. It added a dashboard where users could report similar experiences. It went multilingual. Open-source developers submitted plugins for airport-specific data. An anonymous TSA employee uploaded a redacted training manual that showed racial coding in internal flags. The leak was authenticated within hours. It made front-page news. 4. Inside the machine. Candace was the first to spot it, a quiet but growing whisper from inside the federal apparatus. Mon'nique was being discussed in briefings. Not just as a technologist, but as a disruptor. Dev confirmed it with a single encrypted message: "They see her now." Aaron grinned. "Good. They should." A coalition of lawmakers reached out privately, asking Mon'nique to consult on a pending bill around algorithmic accountability in government contracts. She agreed, but on one condition. "I don't want to consult. I want co-authorship." They hesitated. Then agreed. 5. The Reckoning. Day 4. Virex tried to launch a counter-campaign. A weak apology video. A vague promise of internal review. Mon'nique responded with one tweet. A $4 billion deal went up in smoke over a swab and a stare. What you're apologizing for isn't what you're guilty of. 6. Reimagining the frame. At Etherlink, engineers began reworking internal tools. Bias audits became default. Onboarding now included security awareness not just for code but for culture. Mon'nique turned down 5 requests to appear on primetime news. Instead, she chose to sit down with a student-run tech ethics podcast. The episode topped Spotify's charts within 48 hours. She explained the long arc, how every system, even when designed for safety, carries the biases of its makers. How neutrality is a myth. How refusal becomes power. 7. A new standard. Etherlink announced a new initiative, Threat Redefined. A global open-source framework for ethical profiling and anti-bias modeling in public-facing algorithms. Within weeks, Meta, Salesforce, and IBM signed on. TSA did not. But quietly, its internal training protocols began to change. 8. Her name, in full. At the Forbes Future Tech Conference, Mon'nique was asked to deliver the closing keynote. She stood in front of a standing room-only crowd. No slides. Just presence. For years, she said, I was told to make myself small. To dress safe. To code like a ghost in the machine. And still, it wasn't enough. She paused. So I stopped shrinking. I stopped pretending the cost of visibility was higher than the price of silence. And look what happened when I simply told the truth. 9. Not the end. The flight she missed that day. It took off without incident. But the world it landed in was not the same. And Mon'nique Ellison wasn't the same woman who walked into LAX that morning. She was a movement now. By the time the West Coast sun had fully risen, the digital wave Mon'nique launched from her suite at the Nomad had rippled across 3 continents. European markets opened to murmurs of instability surrounding the Zurich deal. On CNBC Europe, a morning analyst blinked into the camera as news of Etherlink's halt in negotiations hit the airwaves. Shares of Virex dipped 4 points in an hour. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., eyes widened. At the Department of Homeland Security, undersecretaries exchanged tense glances as they skimmed the microsite. The cost of bias calculator was more than a media stunt. It was a scalpel, precise, data-driven, and terrifying in its implications. Even worse, it was undeniable. Every claim was hyperlinked. Every data set, peer-reviewed. Every story, corroborated. What's the plan here? A senior advisor to the secretary asked. There's no playbook for this, someone whispered. Damage control. By noon, both TSA and Virex had issued brief, sterile statements. TSA insisted all procedures had been followed, in accordance with standard security protocols. Virex expressed regret over any misunderstandings and promised to re-engage with Etherlink at an appropriate time. Neither name-dropped Mon'nique. That, of course, didn't matter. Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn were ablaze with her name. Hashtags like #SecurityTheater, #Mon'nique versus the machine, and #cost of bias trended globally. Influencers stitched her site into TikToks, news anchors paraphrased her language. Everyone had a take. Few had the full picture. Which was exactly how Mon'nique wanted it. I need a press window by end of day, she told Aaron over lunch. They were seated at a rooftop cafe, phones between them, laptops open. Make it look like I'm in hiding, but prep the studio. What's the message? Aaron asked. No message, Mon'nique replied. Just math. The interview. At 6 p.m., Mon'nique walked into a sterile set designed to look like a neutral news environment, white walls, clean graphics, and a glass desk. The interviewer was Clarissa Hale, an award-winning journalist known for her poise and sharp intellect. It was an exclusive. I'm here with Dr. Mon'nique Ellison, Clarissa began. CEO of Etherlink, one of the most influential AI companies in the world, and now, possibly, the most controversial figure in tech this week. Mon'nique smiled slightly. Good evening. Clarissa didn't waste time. You walked away from a $4 billion deal because of how you were treated at an airport. I walked away, Mon'nique said evenly, because systemic bias is expensive. People just haven't been forced to calculate the cost. Clarissa leaned in. But what if the TSA agents were just following protocol? They were, Mon'nique said. And that's the problem. Clarissa blinked. Institutional racism isn't always about rogue actors. It's about scripts, standard procedures designed by biased systems, enforced by uncritical compliance. I've studied them. I've contributed to reforming some of them. But when I become the case study, that's not irony. That's proof. The interview ran 23 minutes and 41 seconds. It aired uncut. Within the hour, the full transcript was live on the microsite. By morning, 7.3 million people had read or watched it. Fallout. The next day, internal memos from Virex began to leak. One, dated just 2 days before the incident, outlined concerns from their legal team about potential exposure related to data privacy conflicts in the joint venture. Another hinted at friction over how Etherlink's Data Ethics Board insisted on full audit trails for AI models, a sticking point for Virex engineers. It wasn't sabotage. It was transparency. Mon'nique never commented directly on the leaks. But the narrative shifted again. Maybe this wasn't just about one woman's treatment at an airport. Maybe this was about the kind of world Etherlink was building, and how uncomfortable that made some people. At TSA headquarters, things got colder. A confidential investigation was launched. The agent who flagged Mon'nique was quietly moved to desk duty. A directive went out to regional directors reminding them of optics, as if this were a PR issue, not a policy one. The meeting. 3 days later, Mon'nique walked into the Eisenhower Executive Office building. Behind closed doors, she met with senior officials from DHS, the FAA, and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She wasn't there to negotiate. She came with a presentation. And a clock. 5 minutes, she said, loading her slides. They watched in silence as she walked them through algorithmic feedback loops, economic damage from profiling, and the social cost of invisible bias. She ended with a quote. "When the system can't distinguish between risk and difference, it fails both." No one clapped. But no one argued. "You'll be getting a letter from my legal team," Mon'nique said as she left. It wasn't a threat. It was notice. Echoes. On the ground, travelers began filming their own encounters. A black father detained for carrying too many juice boxes. A Sikh grandmother swabbed twice while her daughter cried. A Latina exec strip-searched because her insulin pump set off an alert. Each story tagged #SecurityTheater. Each one sent to Mon'nique's team. They couldn't keep up. So they built an API. SecurityTheater.ai now accepted direct uploads. It verified metadata, filtered duplicates, and compiled a national heat map of incidents. The data grew too large to ignore. By the end of the week, a coalition of tech CEOs, civil liberties orgs, and federal whistleblowers co-signed an open letter demanding congressional hearings on bias in national security protocols. The headline read, "Bias has a price. We're paying it."